Okay, we are live. So good morning, everyone. I will call this special meeting to order and ask the clerk to do a roll call.
Councillor Shirley.
Present.
Councillor Dayu.
Present.
Councillor Barry.
Present.
Mayor Danielson.
Present.
Mayor Moffat.
Present. May I have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda? Deputy Mayor Danielson and Councillor Barry.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, second by Councillor Barry, be it resolved that the September 23rd, 2021 special agenda be approved as circulated.
All in favor? Carried, thank you. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest today? Seeing none, we'll move straight into item number 5, which is the business of the day. I will ask the CAO to just give us an intro into her report.
Yes, thank you. So the report really what is being provided to give the framework for today's discussion. The history of the airport has been provided, and it although it's lengthy in the report, it is somewhat of a condensed version of the history. I want to just sort of highlight a couple of things in the history, in that from about 2001 to 2010 or so, the focus of the airport and of council of the day was headed toward a new 4,000-foot runway. And the studies were done, and the history is there. But in 2010, council took a different direction with the new council that was elected. And as we all know, we went in the direction of changing the funding scope that we'd received, and we were able to secure the MNRF headquarters, which is now constructed, and we built new hangars. So that I just wanted to highlight that, and really, Jeannie has provided a financial history of the airport to just remind council where we're at. And how we fund those things. And the questions that are before council, just for discussion purposes, are, a result of the mayor and I sort of brainstorming what we wanted council to talk about, and it really just to trigger some discussion. So really are looking for, I guess, some direction around the airport, where we want to go, and what staff need to be including in projects and priorities. So that's the basis of the report.
Thank you for that. And my addition to that would be just an update or further from the direction of 2010, when council I was the only leftover continuing council member at that time. And the new council, we collectively committed to what we framed as viable and incremental growth instead of big, huge chunks. And so a lot of thought and effort has gone into various changes and advancements that have happened since then. We are here today partially due to what Angie just said, but also because we've had a number of deferrals. We've been, the community and the world and the economy has been hit hard by COVID. There has been either a lack of funding or funding opportunities. And definitely, as noted in one of the sections of the discussion items, the competing priorities, which we're facing more and more and more of, including the asset management plan. So we're basically, I'd say, at a bit of a crossroads in terms of opportunity. And we need to assess sort of where we are, what the opportunities are, what's changed externally and internally, and what direction we can either continue to take or a different direction to take around all of the items that are listed in the discussion items, and some of which came from my poll of council members saying, like, we're going to have this meeting, what do you guys want to talk about? So we'll just start at the top. I will say, I'll be very honest and say up front that it is my hope that that where we might land today is to update the land use and development plan in the 2022 budget, and then discuss that outcome, because I think a lot of things have changed in that. So we're talking about a document or a plan that was what was done a number of years ago, and it is definitely outdated. So depending on our conversation today, that would be certainly one of my hopes for an outcome. But Economic development is a big topic. We're just going to have a bit of a free for all, not a free for all, free flow conversation, just looking for, what folks are looking for. We also want to be careful not to say, well, let's get staff to look into this and that and the other and the other. There's a lot of items in here that are dependent upon other decisions, such as the county's economic development officer, and again, funding, what other needs and priorities are for tax dollars. But because the majority of council listed economic development as something they wanted to talk about, that's why it's number one. And that's where we're going to start. So items A to E under economic development were just things that have come out of various conversations. And I would just go straight to opening it to the floor and say, what is council looking for around, the new development area and market changes and things that might make a difference in decision-making and spending going forward. Interviews are being held tomorrow, actually, for the county's economic development officer. Who would do any of the work in terms of that development parcel. So I want to just start there, economic development, and look for thoughts from council as to what you're thinking, where your head's at, what you know, what you'd like to see, and hopes and dreams around economic development at the airport. Lisa Berry.
I guess my question, economic development officer, seeing as that would be a county position, I guess this would maybe be to you or Liz, but what do you see the role would be in that position as far as feasibility and ability to work with the township? Like, so how does that work as far as logistics?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And Liz, feel free to jump in. We don't know yet because the economic development portfolio at the county has been laid out in the job description fairly concisely, with some fuzzy edges because the person hasn't started yet. And the community's changed. We all know the community's changed a lot through COVID. So it's not as though an economic development person at the county would suddenly take over all of that at the airport. But they would bring something to the table, but we don't know what they bring to the table yet because they haven't been hired. And so there's an opportunity there for sure, but what it looks like and what its scope is, I don't think we know yet. Liz?
I was just going to say that that the economic development officer, of course, it's a county position, but it's being developed to look at all 4 municipalities as part of the county, to look at whatever opportunities there are in each of the 4 municipalities. But I think one of the first jobs, aside from hiring a tourism manager, because the economic development officer will have to do that. One of the primary roles is to develop a plan for the county overall, which would include, again, all 4 municipalities. And developing a plan will probably, I don't know, I would think take as much, if not more than 6 months. So, there'll be a period of time where that individual may be able to help us in a small way, but I think that it'll take a little bit of time for the position to ramp up. As Carol said, we can't expect them to take over airport development, on day one. I think it'll take a few months, but we can get input from them and I'm sure have discussions. And I would foresee that individual coming around to each of the 4 municipalities and introducing themselves and hearing from us what we see as things that we want investigated. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say that about sums it up. So it is, at the moment, it's a bit of an unknown. But definitely that person is not going to assume the role. They'll have many roles, many hats to wear. Thoughts, questions, concerns from other members of council around the economic development piece or any pieces therein? Councillor Shortreed.
So just talking about the development area, first of all, I'm afraid, even though land value's gone up, I think cost of build has gone up. So I think even looking at what hydro cost before, I think we probably doubled from what it was a couple of years ago. I would like to see an updated development plan, but really way more realistic to here, not how they did it last time, which really didn't pertain to our area as much. as that report did?
Yeah, I think that report was sort of bigger picture, kind of pie in the sky.
Yeah.
And I think we know more now. We know different now, and there's different people on council, and I think there's some different questions. And so I think that all would feed into what a plan would bring. So how has the world changed? What is possible? What isn't possible? In terms of exactly what you said, sort of more closer to the ground opportunities instead of, some of the really big picture stuff. Julie, keep going.
Okay, and also just from that report, because there was a few things that caught my interest, and Buttonville Airport was one of them. And then reading that Buttonville Airport is obviously still running. The one thing I did read that they can't get any more federal funding, so that would be a huge factor. Is there no federal funding available anymore for municipal airports?
Yeah, there's very rarely money for airports. There, on occasion it comes up, but if it's in the infrastructure pool, is the infrastructure pool more often than not. Right now, it's recreation. It seems to be trying to get people out and about and active. But yeah, airport being included in funding has been a rare bird. That's for sure. Liz?
However, I don't think that precludes us from finding or seeking funding in other areas. If we could show that something we were doing would promote, as an example, tourism in the area, I think there are other avenues that could be explored depending on what it is we think we'd like to do. With respect to a plan or reviewing the plan, and I hate to say it, but it's almost inevitable that we really do need to do that given the age of the plan. It just seems to me sometimes like, let's do another study. It seems like so many times we're planning to plan and nothing, and action is sort of held up by that. But, it's like 6 of one and half of you can't do one without the other. So, I certainly don't disagree that an updated land use plan that's more Algonquin Highlands centric is a good thing to do. But having said that, talking about it, focusing more on Algonquin Highlands, I still think that there's an opportunity to depending on how things develop, to draw the county back into the picture. It's something that, it's a facility that serves all of the county. And the county was a partner with us at one point in time. And I don't think that there's any harm in us pursuing that again, depending on, I think that I'm sure that they backed off because of the astronomical runway plan that was in place at one point in time. It was, when that started ramping up, the council, that the county just thought, well, we're backing away from it. It's too much money. I do think there's an opportunity there.
That annual contribution from the county, I think, was $10,000. So it wasn't a tremendous amount of money, but it was also a commitment, wasn't it? It was that they were at the table as a partner.
It was a commitment, and it, depending on how we make our arguments, it could be a much larger commitment.
Yeah, it could be. Councillor Dayoum.
I'd like to echo Deputy Mayor Danielson's thoughts about the county. I look at the map of where the airport is situated within the county, and it's double the length of time to get to Dorset from the airport as it is to get to Haliburton Village or to get to Minden, and there's as we all know, there's a larger number of economic draws in the villages of Minden and Haliburton, just by virtue of the population size. I mean, really, it's just down to that, and the number of shops and services along the main road. And I do see that the when it comes to tourism, if that is going to be one of the key points in our economic development plan for the airport, I do see that benefit as being very much a county benefit, not a strict Algonquin Highlands benefit at all. In fact, it could be that just by virtue of the proximity of services to the airport, Algonquin Highlands would, I don't want to say benefit less than the others, but I do think that if there is going to be a plan that is tourism driven, it should be a county plan because it is a county service, and somehow getting the support of the other municipalities or the county itself to, into that plan, I think is really, really central to making it a go, and to frankly having the buy-in of the Algonquin Highlands taxpayers as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and that sort of segues, and I don't want to go there just yet. I think we're going to bounce around a bit, but item 3, the marketing and stakeholder relations. It's been something that I've pushed for a long, long time, is to look at those opportunities and how to integrate the airport into the greater tourism picture. And part of that needs to be, I believe, what you called, Councillor Dayu, the pilot culture. And so part of a plan or part of a go forward could be, whether it's through KEGO or COPA or whatever our organizations are, there's a number of them we belong to, finding out what it is that pilots want to do when they go somewhere. Maybe they just want to get a hamburger, but maybe they want to land and do something for a couple of hours. And so if they do, well, what is that? And who do we touch base with? Is it yours outdoors? Do we get, rental cars to get people to restaurants for the Halberton Board? All of those things. There's a million things that are possible, but you don't want to put something out there to be available to the public that the visiting public doesn't want to do. So that's a key component. And I think there's much more we could be doing around that in terms of tourism being a part of that economic pie, for sure. So right off the bat, my take, I have another note takeaways is that Liz and I will get the airport back on the county table and foster that discussion. Of course, it won't be a surprise because it'll be in the newspaper, but anyway, they're going to know we're coming. And then obviously we will ensure that the airport forms part of the discussion with the economic development person that's hired as one of the county's assets. There are many, many assets in the county. The airport is one of them. And just ensure that the airport continues to live within that portfolio so it's not forgotten. So far, that's my 2 takeaways. Liz?
Just as a comment to the who would manage or oversee the plans, to me, it depends on what the plan says, how that we should go forward. The direction that it suggests we take would determine who's going to manage it. I mean, if it was some kind of construction or, it would go to public works, or, it could go in a number of different directions. Marketing, promotion, I mean, some of that I'm assuming maybe could be done by our new communications person. Might be able to help us in a fairly big way with respect to that. Because a lot of the, I don't want to say failures, but we've sort of stalled, and COVID has just stalled and changed so many things. It's really sad. But I think that for anything that we want to do there, any aspect of it, communication is a huge thing, marketing and promotion, and I just don't think that we've been aggressive enough in that area, but for good reason.
Yeah, I would absolutely concur, and the reason that I put that in there, who would implement, oversee, and manage, you're absolutely right. Of course, if it's public works, it's public works. I guess what I was looking for more there is, when we were having in previous council discussions about the runway, I had said, well, where's the guy with the brochures and the fancy suit and the briefcase pitching the case for Stanhope Airport at Buttonville, because Buttonville was closing. And there seemed to be that side of the argument of that process seemed to be missing. And we've had a couple of missteps along the way. Car rental, people would fly in, and I know that a previous airport manager had arranged, there was an enterprise car rental set up in Halliburton. To be honest, I don't even know if it's still there. But you see it on social media a lot. People say, where can I rent a car? So you're right. That's where an updated study would say, you know what, here's the things that you should be doing. And here are the resources that already exist that you can cleave them off to. Or would they say, you need this is such a big picture that you would need to hire somebody on contract. So I guess that's where I'm going is in an updated study, if all the questions that we ask today and all the questions that are in this list are part of that, then then whoever does the study, if that's where we land, should be able to come back, exactly as you said, Liz, and say, well, you've got a communications person, now there's an economic development person, and there's, and assign various tasks to different people. Because I think that's part of what we're missing as well. Jen, did I see your hand back up?
Yeah, a few thoughts, and they're all over, so I'll just pick one and run with it. But it strikes me that the Bancroft Flying Club would probably offer a lot of insight into the kind of scale that we're looking at. You know, we speak of Buttonville, and obviously we're not going to replicate anything that Buttonville does. It's a whole other beast. But Bancroft, it's similar in a lot of ways to us, and they seem to be a bit of a going concern when it comes to their flying club. They seem to be pretty active, and I'd really be interested in a potential sequel to the study, looking at the model of other similar sized flying clubs and pilot cultures such as Bancroft. To a degree, Parry Sound, but I think that's getting a little bit bigger too. So that was one thought. Just another thought when it comes to the possible sequel to the study that was conducted in 2014. As I said in a previous meeting, and I still believe it to be true, I think the big piece that was missing from that study was the half of market analysis, which is not, here are the things that you can do, but here are the things that people want. So when it comes to the development of the industrial lots, for example, yeah, so it's great. We knew from that study that it was possible to do that. What the study was not mandated to do was to find out if there's actually a demand for an industrial lot at, in a space such as our airport, which doesn't have the length of runway to allow commercial or cargo flights to take off. And it also isn't directly attached to an expressway like the Muskoka Airport is. It's right off Highway 11. So you turn out of that airport and boom, you're on the 11 and you're heading south or north, wherever you want to go. So are we close enough to the beaten path that we would find the folk who would want to buy those spaces or lease those spaces? Or are we too far off the beaten path? And speaking as someone who has never done land development before, I would not feel comfortable putting taxpayers' money towards further development of that space in terms of the access road, in terms of hydro, et cetera, until we know for sure that if you build it, they're going to come. So that would be my big hope there. And the second option, which I also raised in a previous meeting, which I'm still interested in talking about, although I did hear reservations from around the table, which I understand and respect, I do wonder if our staff members are the right people to be working on how to manage that property development. And I don't mean technically, because we are the folks when it comes to access roads, when it comes to water, all those things, we've got amazing skills in-house, hands down. But when it comes to basically property speculation on who might come in, how it should be marketed, all of those sorts of things, should that be the municipality's job or should that be a developer's job? And if it's a developer's job, is one possibility not to sell that parcel of land to a developer who has a fixed and certain idea of what's possible there, with the planning that has gone in up until now, with all of those those surveys in place and the severances in place and all of those things, sell it to someone who spends 24/7 thinking about this sort of thing and doing this sort of thing, rather than it being something that the municipality does, which I think is a bit of a risk. I have to say, I'm not entirely comfortable with that risk that we would be taking with taxpayers' money unless we had a lot more information. So those are my 2 cents about that.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and your comments around this particular issue formed part of 1D, which was who would implement, oversee, manage, and that's exactly that is, depending on the direction of that new development area, who is the most suited to do it, and who perhaps is most suited to do which parts of it. So maybe it's a collaborative. And again, none of us sitting here on this screen know. And that's why I think that this conversation is really valuable in terms of fleshing out or teasing out exactly what it is we might need to specifically find out in order to make the right decisions going forward. Knowing full well that whatever decisions we make around the airport will never be the right ones for some people. We have to acknowledge that. So, Liz.
I don't necessarily, well, I don't disagree with Councillor Dayu. I don't completely agree either. I think everyone knows that I'm a little bit more pro-development and proactive about the airport. But what I do see is that, you know, if we're looking for a renewed plan, that we can ask for that sort of guidance, that you know, we could look for the kind of information that you're concerned about, and what a consultant sees is what our level of success might be if we went in one direction or another. For instance, if we went with a developer, and I don't know really, I hate to say this, but I'm not sure if we ever really landed on whether we were going to lease or sell the lots. And you know, I mean, what you're suggesting is selling the whole parcel, and I'm not sure that we are quite ready to, you know, to land there.
No pun intended, of course.
No, yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah. Anyway, you know, I do. It strengthens the idea of doing a plan. Having said that, I hate to plan.
You know, I mean, there's all kinds of plans that get updated a lot more regularly than this one.
Yep, that's true.
There's a significant number of things that have occurred since January 27th, 2014. Internally and externally, we've gone through, you know, an org review as well. We've made some changes there. We have additional staff members, as you mentioned earlier, Liz. We have a communications person. There's a really quite a different scenario at play now than there was in 2014, and it feels like a tremendous opportunity to take advantage of that and reshape the next steps. You're gonna keep going there, Liz? Did you
Yeah, well, yeah, I was just wondering if it fits into to this portion of the discussion. But you know, I just sort of, the word industrial lots, you know, kind of stuck in my mind, and I'm not sure that you know, what we had hoped for would be strictly industrial. You know, it might be sort of industrial / commercial. But I'm also wondering, given the size of the parcel of land that we've got, and one of the things that I'm not sure if I spotted in the report was, what was the size of the parcel of land that we acquired next to the airport?
I have a picture of it, but I don't know
The size of it.
You know,
Why I ask is that that it would seem to me there's enough land there that if we looked at there's a bit of a strip that fronts on the Barrie line, that runs from the last house going towards Dysart to the beginning of the S bend. There's an access there that there might be enough room for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 residential lots, which would, you know, maybe assist in another area than airport, but providing, you know, using the land and providing more housing opportunities.
my concern there is and Angie will confirm that may be considered in the land use planning world an incompatible use.
But is it incompatible when there's a row of housing right along there?
And this is where the planning part comes in. Angie, can you speak to that? Because there exists.
I can. And just to go back to the original question, it was 100 acres that was purchased.
Recollection.
And the lots that exist now are an existing use. By creating new residential lots, that potentially creates knowingly an incompatible use, when, you know, those lots existed prior probably to the airport existing many years ago. So, but that certainly is a question for Sean. Going back to the purpose of purchasing that land was to not only protect the land, the area around the airport, should a new runway be created, but also just for, to avoid those incompatible use situations. And we know that, as new people purchase the lands around the airport, even though they know there's an airport there, it does create some challenges. So we don't want to knowingly do that.
Yeah, and let's not forget too that as part of the historical decision-making process, council post 2010 did, in building the hangars, did agree to leave what would be the footprint of the expanded runway unfettered. And now that expanded runway, should it ever get built, doesn't go all the way to Berry Line. It doesn't go anywhere near Berry Line, but I think if council continues to leave that space available for that potential growth in some other lifetime, then I think you need to be extra careful about not putting those incompatible uses. But again, that would be part of what we'd say is, okay, if we're going to leave that footprint there for potential future use, then what else could be used? Now, we do have details on that development area that the potential lots that would be technically considered airside wouldn't be airside until a longer runway was put in. And without the longer runway, then does that, to Jen's point, does that say, well, you can't sell aviation related lots when there's no aviation attached to it? So then you're into chicken and egg territory. Can one not happen until the other happens? And what exactly, and it says somewhere we decided what kind of light industrial we wanted in there. That was the whole plan. We didn't want just sort of an industrial park that had various businesses in it. It was meant to be, it's an airport. It was meant to be as aviation related as possible, notwithstanding that we don't have the new runway to fully form any airside lots. So again, that chicken and egg. Angie, did you have your hand up there? I know Lee, I see Lisa. So.
No, the only one more thing that I wanted to add was just keeping in mind again for if council's going to leave the footprint of the runway, which essentially would be where a taxiway would also go, should council develop the airside lots, is the protection of that area around with the vacant lots for closer to Berry Line also provides protection for any aerial easements that might be required, anything like that. So just keeping that in mind as well.
Yeah, and when we go back to and I do see Lisa's hand and then Jen's, when we go back to the page 39 of the land use and development plan, but that's where that's indicated, the taxiway. And then one of the ideas was sort of fly-in housing, which sounds very pie in the sky, but is successful other places. I'm not sure it's successful where there's going to be 4 feet of snow. And I think that would be part of what would need to be revisited is all of those things and how to fit those various pieces together. Councillor Barry.
Just looking at the list that's here, I do think that item number 6 about what we want the airport to be in regards to sustainability and if there's a different approach, growth, status quo, all of that. I do think that, we have all of these plans and we have all of this information and, we have a runway that we've kept. I just think it is worth discussing, is all of that previous work, I don't want to say rooted, like is all of that previous work rooted and possibly inhibiting us from doing other things like that? I think that's, when we talk about all of the studies, well, since all of those studies, it's been very evident that there is a housing shortage in Haliburton County, both affordable and housing in general. I think it was Liz the other day, you know, where is the line as, where is the line drawn with affordable and you know, government funded or serviced housing, you know what I mean? Like, I just wonder, when we talk about, you know, this is what we have already in plan, these are all the plans that we have, does any of that stop us from changing an approach?
I think that's, yeah, an excellent question. And that's why we're having this discussion and about seeing what external and internal factors have changed. What's COVID done? What's the, you know, through the community safety wellbeing plan, we're learning that Haliburton County is the, I hope I'm not wrong about this, but is the second highest cost of living in Ontario outside of Toronto. We have a desperate housing crisis. So is it possible that the plans for access roads and industrial lots is foregone in favor of just keeping a recreational runway with a recreational airport with a small runway and then trying to accommodate some housing? Sure. I mean, those are all viable conversations to have, which is why we're having this. And I think that could be folded into a renewed plan. I mean, would be people who would say, why would you spend all that money to get that far into aviation related opportunities and then claw it back in favor of others? And I would say, well, that would be a municipality being attentive to its local needs. So Lisa, it's a good question. I think that's our purpose, is to explore anything and everything around this. Angie, I'm going to go to you and then back to Jen.
I just want to, Sean is listening. So he sent me, the official plan had identified that existing residential uses within the special policy area, the airport business area, shall be permitted. But new residential uses shall be prohibited, with the exception a single residence accessory to the primary use. So the intent there is to develop it as business. You can have a residence that's accessory to that, but you can't just have a residence. So should council go in a different direction with that property, the official plan would definitely need to be amended.
But I guess that's what I mean is as the people having this conversation and being attentive to changing needs that have come from a variety of inputs. It's our job to ask these questions and see what's the best fit. Ultimately, maybe airport to continue. I'm not saying discontinue an airport. That's not what I'm saying. But if the future access in a 4,000-foot runway is not going to happen in the foreseeable future, it's within the right of those elected to make the decisions to, you know, do the work to have the answers and opportunities. So nothing's off the table. That's why we're here today. I'm going to go to Jen and then back to Liz.
I really do want to honor and follow up on Lisa's question. I thought that was an excellent interjection. Before we do that, though, I did have a couple of thoughts about the previous comment or the previous conversation. I wonder if it's possible, should we go ahead with a renewed plan or a renewed study for the space? Are we able to land on the extension of the landing strip? Yes or no? And are we able to land on the real potential of the fly-in community? Yes or no? Because I think if we mandate a new study to be brought forth, those are two really critical pieces that are either in there seriously or should not even be referenced by the folks doing the study. And where I sit on those issues is, I do not believe that an extended runway is a good idea for the benefit of the taxpayers of Algonquin Highlands. I think there are other ways of using taxpayer money to directly support our community than the extension of the runway. I know that that's my opinion, and I honor and want to hear about other opinions on that, but that's where I'm sitting right now. So I would not currently be in favor of extending that, which then, as Mayor Moffat said, has that carry-on implication of what we can expect and what we can't expect as a general aviation hub for that space. And in terms of the flying community, Mayor Moffat, I hear you say that it's successful in other places. I myself have not found successful examples of a flying community in a space such as ours. In fact, the one that was referenced in the 2014 report was out of Carp, Ontario, which is about a half-hour drive away from downtown Ottawa, and they could not make a go of it. They'd received something like, I believe, 30% of deposits on those spaces. They still couldn't make a go of it, even though it was being pushed by a professional developer, a full staff, full team, etc. Half-hour away from downtown Ottawa with all the other amenities close by and the extended runway, and they couldn't make a go of it, and they had to abandon that plan. And I just don't feel that I am willing to take the risk to say, yeah, let's explore that, when I have yet to find any other community such as ours with a successful bankable experience to point to and say, this is why we're gonna take a stab at that. So my sense is I would like to say no to an extended runway, although I'm absolutely open to hearing the arguments of others, should other people say, feel otherwise, and no to the flying community, so that if and when the report does go back out, we've got a more tailored set of expectations into which we'll be drilling down.
Yeah, I just want to circle back on that. Are you referring to my comment about potential residential being successful? Is that what you were just?
No,
Is it successful in Florida? I don't know if it's successful in Canada.
The fly-in community of, not the residential in the sense that Councillor Barry is referring to, but the flying community idea of literally have your house and your plane garage is underneath it. There were a couple of photographs in the 2014 report, one of which, by the way, was John Travolta's personal house, which I'm not sure is the best example of what we would be intending for our space. But the idea of a theme-driven community, aviation community, where people fly in and either rent or own a space where they sleep and possibly work, and then have access to the runway, sort of that pie in the sky idea of community, I don't believe is the right avenue for us to look down myself.
Yeah, no, we're saying the same thing. And that's why I was saying that it was one of the suggestions that was made in the 2014 study. And I think at the time we kind of said, I don't think that would be successful here. So I don't think there's any interest. There was never any interest. And Lisa and Liz were on council then. So that was one of the things we kind of said, like, that doesn't make sense here.
Okay.
So I don't, as far as I'm concerned, I agree with you. I don't think that's a viable option.
Okay.
But what I wouldn't want to do is, if council said, we're not sure that the live above your plane residential idea is viable here to suit our having changed needs, that's said poorly, then we could make sure that that isn't included, unlike hen condos, which we laughed at the beginning and then later thought, hey, that is a good idea. Because the community is changing and needs are always changing. So that's the point, is to continue to be attentive to it. Liz.
You kind of scared me there when you said that you wanted to ignore the fly-in or say no to the fly-in community. I wondered what you say no to fly-ins for an airport. I completely agree that sort of residential, airport-oriented residential development is not something that would work. We all agreed to that. However, because that was an element of the plan in the first place, it led me to think that there still might be possibilities just on a narrow strip of land along the Berry line. It wouldn't stop access to the entire parcel for other kinds of developments to take place, on the 100-acre parcel. But it just seemed something that we could consider as standard residential, not necessarily aviation related, although it might be a pilot who wanted to build there. In response to the, putting a next to the runway, the second runway, I believe that at this point in time, given the amount of money, energy, time, and consulting that has been done, to say no to that runway at this point in time is extremely short-sighted. There were a number of reasons for that. runway, one of which was safety of the existing runway and crosswinds. There's been so much planning that I think that we can move forward with different thoughts and ideas without saying no to a runway. I mean, we knew when we protected that land that it was a very long-term issue, that it was something that would go probably well beyond any of our terms, but it would be there if there needed to be an opportunity for a different runway, even if it wasn't a 4,000-foot runway, if it was, you know, something less than that. I just would hate to see us say no to that, to wiping that part of the development out at this point in time. I really believe it's short-sighted.
I don't disagree with you. There was a lot of thought went into leaving that footprint available for future. And I think that even just with the conversation we've had so far, we would be talking about millions of dollars that we don't have. So we also need to remember that the funding of any of these ideas is almost out of reach for us. So I agree with you in terms of short-sightedness, because I think we need to leave that open and focus on other things that can happen around. As far as I understand, there's no intent to build a 4,000-foot runway or a 3,000-foot runway or anything else. We simply cannot afford it. And I think it would be the same as I thought it was in 3 councils ago, would be a road to nowhere, because it had nothing attached to it. So we talked back then about when the 2010 council, council convened, we talked about making the airport as viable as it could possibly be, to the extent that the only next step is a big runway. And that's years and years and years and years and years away, as far as I'm concerned. So, but I think it's still important to leave that footprint. But there's a big long page of things to talk about. So I don't know how hung up we want to get on a 4,000-foot runway or that particular future endeavor at the moment today. I'm going to go to, I'm not sure who had their hand up first, Lisa or Jen. Who wants to go? Lisa, go ahead.
I'm not interested in saying that we would, not protect that area. I just think that we should be looking at not missing other opportunities by protecting it. I'm curious to know if there's been any sort of, because we've had coordinators versus management. I do wonder, have we seen a growth in the airport use as it stands today? Because I think if we're not seeing that growth right now, that's a huge marketing and situation that has to be taken seriously as well.
Yeah, see, I agree with you 100% there. I think that it's definitely chicken and egg, and we're in charge of both. And we had a plan in 2014 that had short, medium, and long-term strategies, some of which we picked away at. We don't have that. Going back to item 1E or 1D is the who, and we should be able to give a plan to somebody, or a plan should come back and say, here's certain pieces. We talked about this a little bit earlier. We haven't, there's certain aspects of the current plan that we haven't done good service to and for, and there's definitely an opportunity there. We've had some challenges with connecting to the tourism community, and there's opportunity all around us that has, for a variety of reasons, simply hasn't been taken advantage of. So we don't know possible within the local community and the tourism community, because the efforts have not been made for a variety of reasons to see what they are, and then use that as incremental growth. But I agree with you. Like, that's a challenge and lots of opportunity. Jen, and then Liz.
I absolutely understand the drive to make the airport as viable as possible, protect the space in the hopes that, no, I won't even say in the hopes, but in order to keep open the option that we might build that additional runway one day. I do get the ethos behind that, but I also think it kind of limits our envelope a little bit. There are really 3 different there are three different approaches to take. One would be, let's build this, build this airport. Let's make it more of an economic hub on the absolute knowledge that we're going to put in that additional runway. If we knew absolutely that runway was happening, the decisions we would be making today would be very different than the ones that we would make if we were saying, well, we don't know if it's going to happen yet, so let's just kind of get as close as we can to making that viable in the hopes that that will tip the balance and that eventually that decision might be made. Those are two very different economic streaks. They're very different in terms of planning, obviously in terms of resources and in terms of intention. And it's a little bit like, I don't even really have a good analogy, but sometimes if you only go part way in the hopes that it's going to tip the balance, it doesn't end up tipping the balance. And then you only get this halfway thing, which doesn't really satisfy a whole set of needs. So, one approach is we're absolutely sure we're going to put the runway in, and therefore, what are the economic development opportunities that we could and should be developing, knowing that that's a reality. We're never going to choose that today. I get that.
She's back. Sorry, she's back.
Okay.
We lost Councillor Shortreed, but she's back. So
okay, great. So that would be one. The other one is the middle ground, which we've been taking so far. But the third one is, knowing absolutely that runway is not viable. Let's ditch that plan and talk about what the other opportunities are with that space. And I think the assumption that we're sticking to the middle ground, that, let's hope, let's make it as viable as we can in the hopes that someday a future council might be able to find the funds to do it. It is a valid approach, yeah, absolutely valid, but I think it limits us from what Lisa Berry was referring to earlier, which is, hey, let's just take stock for a minute about all of the possibilities for this space, not just the one that conforms with the direction we've been taking so far in a long-term hope that something is going to occur. Maybe the priority is to think about affordable housing. And I know there are a whole bunch of tick boxes that have to be ticked in order to get any support for that, such as proximity to jobs, proximity to banks, public transport, all those sorts of things. I mean, I know that's a difficult and possibly improbable beast for us to pick up on, but I wonder if the middle ground of let's protect that airport runway space in the hopes, and let's develop something on the side of it, again, in the hopes, is the right balance for our community, or whether that whole space could be, we could draw a line in the sand and the whole space could be used for another big plan that more serves our taxpayers in a far more direct way.
Yes, I think that's what has to be examined, and ultimately, gird your loins and your inbox, because we're certainly going to hear about it. And if you haven't lived through the public runway discussion, I anticipate that it will get revved up again shortly after this meeting. That's fine. I mean, it's always good to hear back from the public about this, but there's adamant and fierce positions on either side of the runway, shall we say. Liz.
Sort of going first to Councillor Berry's comment about what growth have we seen at the airport, and the difficult part about that is we've probably seen none, and that's because everything has come to a screeching halt, partially because of COVID, partially because of the direction that we decided to take at the last projects and priorities. So it's very hard to measure growth. And if we were taking some of the actions that we could be taking, you might see an exponential growth at the airport. You might not, but we don't know that for sure. I think that to Councillor Dayou's comments about let's ditch the runway, I really have a problem with that. I mean, we literally, although it technically might not have been called expropriation, we basically expropriated land. in order to proceed with this plan. And that requires us to proceed with this plan in one form or another, not to ditch the runway. I think that there's still lots of opportunity and land available for us to develop even a slowly growing hub in that area. There's things that we had decided to do at the airport itself. I understand later on we're going to see that we're going to have to be making improvements to the terminal building. I still think that there's lots of opportunities that is going to keep or could keep this council busy while protecting the basic plan. I really believe it's too early and really short-sighted, and maybe even legally challenging for us to ditch the idea of another runway. And that's whether it's a 2,500-foot runway or a 4,000-foot runway or any runway at all.
And in terms of the question about, what growth has been seen, I'm presuming that means since the development of the MNRF base, because we worked really, really hard on that. And that made a huge change in the viability of that space and made it more hub-like. I do agree with Liz. I think we talked about that just a few minutes ago, that I think there's lots that we could do, again, incrementally. But I see your point, Jen, about is the incremental progress at the risk of losing different opportunities? I mean, if I see that fully, I think though that I would probably land where Liz is that there's, and we would need to look into the legal aspects of the land of the 100 acres can be done afterward by staff. Lisa Berry.
I think this is a really great conversation. I also think that it's important to realize that the airport is just one entity of the municipality. And as we've seen, especially over the last, I would say 5 or 6 years, the amount of infrastructure that is older and needing repair, and as the municipality grows and the tax base grows, like we're seeing not just repairs, but new growth that's needed in the entire township. So I just want to point that out. I think everyone's aware of that, but I do think that having something in place with a hope, also, we need to be realistic on how would that be funded.
Absolutely, yeah. Liz?
I'm just wondering about trying to continue through some of these, points 2 to 6, because, depending on where we land with some of those in our discussions might help us circle back to where we are right now.
Yeah, we can do that. We've touched on a couple, but we can absolutely, if you'd like, we can just jump right to number 2, revenue streams. And I know that Councillor Dayu had some thoughts around this. So as a preamble to that the funding, leases, fees, and fuel, etc., they're examined pre-budget every year. We did make a decision a number of years ago to make some market adjustments to lease rates. Fuel remains competitive, and historically fuel has been slightly less in order to encourage visitation. But visitation is the what. So that ties into marketing and stakeholder relations. Is it somebody flies in for a burger, or do they fly in to spend money in town? Well, they can't get to town to spend the money. Again, chicken and egg. So I don't know whether we want to bring Jeannie in and have a look, or if anybody has any specific questions about the financial pages, the summary that Jeannie, the treasurer, put together. We can go there, or we can just have a conversation. What would council like to do around that? Liz?
Just a question. I know that we did do some comparative work on the lease rates. I just wonder how long ago, I can't remember how long ago that was, and if that's something that we continue to monitor, or if we need to do that again. As a separate discussion, not a discussion for today, I would like us to have a bit of a discussion about the leases and certain aspects of the leases. Not today, but for today, my question is, do we continue to compare market rates for the leases that we're charging.
Angie?
I know the lease rates comparison that we did was probably about 5 years ago. I know that the groups that KEGO and AMCO, I think it is, they circulate fairly regularly on lease rates, fuel, all those things. I haven't seen the latest on that, but I do know that since we did our comparisons a few years ago, we continue to do an annual increase, as council knows. But certainly that's something that we could put out there on our own for sure to find out that information.
Liz, did you want to, are you coming back on that?
Just in addition to that, I know that there, I mean, there are a number of things that we could do, you know, like investigating the lease rates, looking at parking fees, looking at you know, what our fuel rates are and whether they're competitive. They are all small items, but incrementally they, you know, they start to add up and slowly close the gap in cost versus revenue. You know, I think that there's probably other things that we can investigate with respect to revenue. But you know, I guess that would depend on where, you know, if we go out for a revised or renewed plan, it would depend on, you know, what we see there.
Yeah, I'd like to see, I think part of that, I'm going to say this 100 times today, is chicken and egg. So we could look at, you know, doing a review of fees and fuel and lease rates and all those things in the financial picture. But then it could easily be argued, well, you can put in landing fees. For me, as I'm not a pilot, but for me as a pilot to fly in and do what? So then do you try and improve the stakeholder relations and provide opportunities for people to do things so they'll pay the new or increased or modified fee to come to do the thing? Right now, if you consider raising fees, you're raising fees for people to recreationally come in and do little more than get a burger and use the washroom and fly away. So which comes first is the question. That will be the perennial question about this in this entire discussion, I think. Jen.
Yeah, I fully agree with Liz's comments. Also completely understand and agree with yours, Mayor Moffat. I think though, the key that I'd like to pull from Liz's is the opportunity to look for possible new sources of revenue or tightening sources of revenue that maybe don't play a part in the annual review of some of these things. For example, in the 2014 plan, it referred to a long wait list for hangar use. And I'd be really curious to know, well, you know, where do the hangars sit now in terms of our opportunities? Is there still a long wait list? Does the lease for the hangar offset entirely what we pay to keep those hangars in, you know, in a strong state of repair? If we built 2 more hangars or 4 more hangars, would they be picked up immediately and would they pay for themselves within just a few years? You know, is it possible that there's a hangar opportunity here that maybe staff are aware of, but council isn't aware of because we just haven't had that conversation? So it's looking for other things like that where investing in a new thing would end up having a positive revenue impact in the medium term for that space. That's the kind of thing that I'd like to explore.
And so what I'm jotting down is as a follow-up to this discussion today is perhaps we can ask for a staff report around all of those things. I think somewhere along the lines we either asked for or lost off of the monthly reports airport movements, how many planes came and went. So we are a bit, here we go again, flying in the dark. So maybe as follow-up to this, we could have a not unlike the financial summary that the treasurer has done, but a sort of State of the Union report for the airport of you know, how the hangar leases have increased, you know, what the movements are, going back to Lisa's comment about, well, what is the growth? Are we seeing more people using the airport? What are they using it for? So I would look to Angie for that to see if that's if that's achievable with, if we've been keeping track of that stuff as a course of business at the airport, because of course none of us work at the airport. So, Angie, what would your thoughts be on something like that?
That's definitely something we can pull together. I do know right now we don't have a waiting list for hangars. We have had over the last number of months at least 2 that are vacant, not including hangar D. And so I don't know the reasons for that, whether it's COVID or what. I couldn't tell you though that, but we do have another opportunity with our communications coordinator to do some promotion and things like that for our hangars. So, but as far as a report, yes, we could pull that together.
Okay, so that can be a follow-up, just so we have a more comprehensive, I keep calling it a State of the Union, but we get pieces, but we don't have, I'd like to see a summary, not unlike what the treasurer has done around finances, just around airport operations that might fill in some of the questions that council's asking. I'm going to go to Liz and then Lisa.
Yeah, I'm really glad that Councillor Daye brought up the hangars, because that was probably one of the next questions that I was going to ask was where we stood with the hangars, if any of them are empty, what process we use when one is empty. I mean, you know, that kind of goes back to marketing and promotion, letting people know that there are actually hangars available, and you know, it's just such a difficult time to gauge, you know, what people want to do. They probably are all waiting for the end of the pandemic, if there is ever going to be such a thing. I just, one comment that I wanted to just add is that, and don't shudder everyone, but there is space. You know, when we built the last hangars, there's space for, I think, one more building that would house 4 hangars. That, you know, could be added if there was a market for them, and we could see that there was a market for them. There's room where the existing hangars are for more to be built. I think we probably need to deal with hangar D first before we even think about that.
Well, certainly, you know, you're right. When in the 2014 study, there was a waiting list, and now there isn't, and that's part of the market study. That's the market analysis of what is it the aviation world wants and needs from our airport, and are we able to reasonably and sensibly provide it, and if so, to what outcome and benefit for all. So it's a bit of a train with many cars. Lisa Berry. You're on mute.
Sorry, just looking at the revenue stream and you know, just trying to think of ideas and looking at the financial, just these are just pie in the sky thoughts, but you know, it's interesting when you fly into the airport, you can refuel. However, you know, if you get out of your plane and get into your car and your car is on empty, you can't fill up your vehicle. You know, the closest gas station is about 20 kilometers away. And I just wonder, is that something that could ever be entertained in regards to fuel? Could the fuel be extended to other ways as far as domestic vehicles? Another thought is, we've talked about hangars. There's also been, throughout the years, more and more people downsizing and needing areas to store things. Is storage an opportunity that could be done at the airport or would that strictly have to be aviation? And then last, as we're evolving and we're seeing, you know, more and more vehicles that are using charging stations, is that something that could be considered down the road? Those are just thoughts I've written down and just wanted to put on the table.
Yeah, I think, you know, for the purposes of today's discussion, anything is possible. What I'd like to do is hear what everybody has to say and then whittle it down, although I don't anticipate much whittling, to what might form an RFP to update the report. So in terms of, you know, domestic fuel use, I think anybody who runs a gas station will tell you that it's more hassle than it's worth. Now you're into TSSA standards and whatnot, and obligations for maintenance of certain standardized equipment. So I don't know. I'm not saying no. I don't know, and I don't know. I don't know why anybody would have an empty gas tank, but yeah, you never know. I think anything can be on the table in today's discussion because that's the purpose. Jen.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that Lisa makes. I think my fear or worry when we get into the details of things like making sure that people can fill up their cars when they land is the line between fostering tourism and catering to tourism. Now, mind you, I think having a local fill-up station would be great for our local community. You know, so so it's not the best example of what I'm saying, I suppose, but I'm fearful of, you know, if we put in, for example, a lot of money towards getting a couple of rental cars there all the time and having to administer that, or I don't, you know, I'm worried that if we get into catering to the tourists that fly in rather than fostering tourism more generally, then we're spending money on things that are going to benefit individuals from Orangeville more than the individuals from Algonquin Highlands. So again, Lisa's example is probably the wrong one because, you know, more gas would be welcome. But you know, how do we make all of this of benefit to the taxpayers of Algonquin Highlands? Because I agree, putting in a gas facility, that would cost a huge amount of money. There are all these environmental things that would have to happen. And, you know, and if, I don't know, we also have nothing in our reserves for docks and landings anymore. And if I think about, you know, where my vote lies in terms of where to put hundreds of thousands of dollars, it would be into something that is going to directly benefit our taxpayers, like docks and landings, which is a core part of our identity and which many folk across our township uses. Or it would be, you know, in the rec center, which hopefully we'll get the Trillium money for, but there's so much on our to-do list that has a direct benefit to our taxpayers that I would hesitate before putting money into things that would cater to someone who flies in from Orangeville twice a year in order to, you know, have a burger and fly out again. And it's about just finding where that line is.
I think you raised a very good point around particularly the car rental idea. And the idea was when we did have them available for a short time, we didn't operate that service. That was run by a third party, and that's the kind of thing that I mean by stakeholder relations is who's out there with whom we can partner for them to do their thing in our space that becomes that community-wide benefit. And I don't know what those are.
Yeah.
You know, I've got a million sparkly pony ideas, but I don't know how viable they are. So I think that's part of that stakeholder relations is who or what can we partner with to bring service so that we are not particularly catering using tax dollars to a person from Orangeville twice a year for a burger or a visit to the sculpture forest. But wouldn't it be great if they could do that and spend a little bit of money in town? But not with us not running a car rental service, because that would just not be feasible or viable in my mind at all.
Can I just follow up on that before you go to, just because it's directly related? Then if we do agree to putting out tender for another a sequel to the 2014 study, then I would suggest that we make that a very specific part of the directive, that instead of just listing potential partner operators, that they actually do a concrete study of which partner operators are interested and available to jump on board. Because there was a very short one-line list in the 2014 study. Let's do more than that. Let's prove that through a partnership approach, we can save taxpayers' dollars. We can draw as little as possible from the reserves, but we're also fostering, not catering to tourism.
Yeah, and I think those are great words, and that definitely there's a difference between fostering and catering, and we want to stick with the former. Yeah. Liz?
To one of Lisa's suggestions, I think that we can't, the fuel idea might not be the greatest, but the electric charging station at the airport probably isn't a bad idea at all. And I don't disagree. We all know that we've got competing challenges about infrastructure and what we need to do with infrastructure. But when you mention docks and landings, we've got to have a discussion about how we're going to continue with that. And I've got to say that the last landing we built was not in the best benefits to all of the taxpayers in Algonquin Highlands. So that's not a good example in my mind at all.
But the overall need of docks and landings across the 27 that we own, the asset management plan certainly tells us that there's a lot of money to spend there. And it's not just about, nailing together some boards so somebody can get in a boat. Those discussions have shown us that there are bigger fish to fry around that in terms of ownership, expansion, growing need, changing ideas, and competing demands. Just within docks and landings. 27 that we own, the asset management plan certainly tells us that there's a lot of money to spend there. And it's not just about, nailing together some boards so somebody can get in a boat. Those discussions have shown us that there are bigger fish to fry around that in terms of ownership, expansion, growing need, changing ideas, and competing demands.
Oh, that's so strange. Can't hear you, Carol.
Those discussions have there are bigger fish to fry ownership, expansion, growing, changing ideas, and competing demands.
I hate to ask you to unplug Carol, but can you unplug Carol? Dear.
Okay, we're back live. Apologies for that little bit of a nightmare there, but we are back. I don't recall, I just have that loop in my head, so I don't know where we were. I did want to circle back and remind council too that we did discuss e-charging stations as possible next steps in that process. So that's already in the books, which is good. I think unless anybody has anything else to say on marketing stakeholder relations, I think we've kind of covered that. I think we keep dipping back into that. And so we could just move to the airport committee, which is sort of separate from the overall airport development, but it's that committee has been on hiatus for some time. And I know Liz, as a longstanding member, you'd like to see that committee. None of our committees are meeting yet anyway, but seeing that committee getting up and going. I want to have a little talk about, and this could maybe be a separate discussion or it could be today, is I'm not sure that the purpose of the airport committee, as it has been for many, many years, is really relevant anymore. And so is there, like, what should the committee do or be doing to support just airport works? Liz?
I mean, I think everybody knows that I've been disappointed in the fact that we haven't been able to meet. I mean, there's no point in planning events because we just can't do that. I would like to see the committee reestablished, if only for planning events, because going forward, that is going to be something that we can do, and that definitely increases traffic, enhances, it promotes the airport in a, from a small to medium way. I do think that possibly is a separate item of discussion that we don't need to necessarily look at today, that we need to bring the terms of reference for the airport committee forward, because what it actually says and what the committee does is different. At least that's my recollection the last time I looked at the terms of reference. I think that the terms of reference allows for a little bit greater involvement than what they have had, and whether that's right or wrong is something that we need to discuss as a group. If the committee is to be reestablished, what it should be or could be doing. But at the earliest opportunity, of course, as is the case with all of our committees, I'd like to see it reestablished.
I wrote down in my notes, I wrote down terms of reference question mark. So we can bring that forward, have a look at that at an upcoming meeting, and get ready for when committees start meeting again. With COVID restrictions that are currently in place. For a small recreational airport, this committee has always had 4 to 5 fly-ins a year, which is highly unusual. Most small airports only have sort of one big event. But I think there's value in discussing the terms to see if there's something different that group could be doing, or more or less or different. Yeah, absolutely. Jen?
I don't know which comes first, the cart before the horse, but with the economic development person going to be on ramping in the next 6 to 8 months, with our brand spanking new communications role, with the study is probably going to come quite a bit later and may not be relevant to this, but I just wonder if it's more important to have those 2 functions in place and rolling when it comes to the development of our strong tourism, outward facing pilot culture marketing plan, and then set the terms of reference for a potential committee around how they can engage and push ahead with that plan, or whether it's the opposite way around, whether there would be an airport committee in place whose terms of reference would be to help figure out what that plan might look like. It's a question that I have.
I'll go to Liz.
I don't disagree, and I think helping with the terms of reference, will help us in that discussion. There's certain aspects that may come out of our discussions from the development of a plan, from an economic development officer, but I don't think that there's any argument that fly-in events help promote the airport, and that can be done, whether it's little or bigger, or in whatever iteration it takes. I think we all agree that we want more air traffic, even if it's just tourism traffic coming into Haliburton County to enjoy us, and that's part of what the events do. And if we're going to have events next year, there's a fair bit of planning associated with that. I'm assuming that by next year we will be able to have events, even if they have to be slightly different than they've been in the past. Angie's got some thoughts.
Yes, she does.
So in 2019, council did bring the terms of reference forward and actually revamped the terms and changed the name of the committee to the Stanhope Municipal Airport Events Committee. So just looking for, do we still want to bring that forward again, or are we happy with how they are now?
Liz?
Thanks for that reminder, Angie. I'm sort of thinking about the terms of reference prior to that. I would still like to see us have the discussion, and just, with this group, depending on how we decide we're going to go forward, on what role that committee could or should have.
Yeah, I think too, to remember that the last time we put out a call for committee members for this particular group, there was not a lot of uptake, if any at all. And that may have been let's be very honest, it may have been with the revamping of the terms to make it an events committee, because there were a number of people who were longstanding members of the airport committee who were essentially either tasked through the previous terms or just historically, who were advising on, you know, capital works and looking for discussions on runway expansion. And none of those things belong to that committee. That's not what that committee was for. The committee is an events committee. So that's why we made changes. But we can look at it again, knowing full well that when the time is right to get members, we would already have that little bit of review or work, if any, done, that would be completed. And then get folks ready to go. Because you're right, it does, ramping back up for fly-ins is going to take a little bit of work. And then, you know, dipping down into item number 5, infrastructure challenges. Where are we with the cook shack? I mean, that's still a challenge, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So that can form part of that conversation is what that might look like. Councillor Barry.
I do think when, just in sort of in relation to what Deputy Mayor Danielson said and Councillor Dayu, I do think that similarly to how we formed the Environment Committee, you know, we looked at who we wanted to sit on that committee as far as, you know, what they brought to the table in regards to environment, Halliburton, lake associations, capturing the entire township wards. I think similarly with the airport, maybe we need to look at aviation, but also again, look at things like tourism, having someone from the chamber on the committee, maybe having someone from, I don't know, the forest, something like that. But I do think that maybe opening that window of who sits on that committee could be something to talk about.
Yeah, and so plugging in the right people for what the goal is. So yeah, I mean, we can talk about all of that. The challenge is when you identify a slot for a certain organization or purpose, if you don't get somebody that fits that, you then just, you know, accept the next person who comes along, and then does that defeat your purpose? But again, that's a bit of a moot conversation because we haven't had it yet. So, Councillor Shortreed.
I don't know if this works or not, but we have such a hard time getting volunteers for every committee. Is it an option to have a subcommittee from the Stanhope Rec Center that does airport stuff?
In my
Or does
opinion,
it have to be
similarly to housing, I think that would be an incompatible use. I think people, the recreation folks are around,
Okay.
you know, soccer and things for families and kids, and I don't see that as a match at all.
Okay, I just know we're gonna have a hard time.
Yeah, there's definitely a lag in Julie's connection. I'm going to go to Liz and then to Lisa. Actually, I'm sorry. I think Lisa's hand was up first. So I'll go to Lisa first and then back to Liz.
I do think that, you know, until we have another look at a wholesome discussion on economic development, we might be missing the obvious people that would fit that committee as well.
Yeah, you know, that's a very good point, Lisa, because historically there has been discussion around having a committee, again, with hand-picked people who are business people, who have started business, who have created opportunity, who have developed, and for those types of folks to take a plan and make it into something. And that would be taking a committee to a whole different level, which is kind of exciting to think about. And so going back to item 1D, who would implement, oversee, manage any plans. That's definitely a consideration, Lisa. So glad you brought that up, because it would be a big step to go there, because you're taking a plan, a municipal plan, and giving it to a bunch of people to work with. And there's some, you know, a little bit of angst around that. But there's a lot of very qualified, knowledgeable, and enthusiastic people out there who they don't want to plan a fly-in, but they want to see the airport develop, and they be the ones to help do it. So that's worth talking about as well in the bigger picture. For sure. Liz, back to you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, depending on where we land with the terms of reference for the airport committee, and what our plan actually says we want to do, we might not have trouble getting members at all. If there's something there that they can sink their teeth into or get excited about, other than just flipping burgers. It depends on where we land, but it might not be the same challenge in finding the traditional volunteers.
Mhm. Because it would be an entirely different ilk.
Yeah.
Councillor Dayu.
Yeah, and that's sort of where I was going when I referred to the cart and the horse and whether we should have a plan before terms or terms before a plan. I'm now wondering if two committees would be appropriate, wherein one is focused on the events and the fly-ins and making sure that there is a concession stand, because there are some folk in our township and in every township who are really good at organizing events and making sure that people feel welcome and all of those other things. And I would suspect it's an entirely different set of people who would be interested in thinking about, hey, the Stanhope Municipal Airport Flying Club, do you think we could get that off the ground? That might be a very, very different group of folk, or whatever other part of the economic development. So, given how far we are away from a renewal of a plan of that type, I would almost suggest let's get the events committee started again and going on these specific things that we can be working on towards next year, and then maybe there's a whole other committee structure out there for later on.
Yeah, I like that idea, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and somewhere there's notes around the creation of that second kind of committee, and I recall, I'm not going to name them, but there's a couple of people who are still in the community who at the time were quite keen to be on such a committee, and so they may be quite keen again should we get there. So does council want to look at it that way? Then we'll bring the terms of reference back for the events committee. Just make sure we're on the right page. See if we can populate that committee to plan the events for next year. They've always been tremendously popular. I think we've lost Young Eagles just generally over the big picture, but the fall color flying, it was always tremendously popular. Too late for this year, obviously, but so we'll do that, and then we'll consider as we go forward the creation of some separate group of folks who would be quite keen on moving any kind of plan forward or assisting to move some kind of plan forward. I'm seeing nods. Liz.
I just, I wanted to mention that, back some time ago, when we changed the structure of staffing the airport, that Adam had brought several ideas forward about the different types of events that we could have. There had been some thinking done about that, and I think that there's probably there was some reluctance on behalf of some of the committee members to change things up at all. Just say, for instance, set up some tents and have some artisans there, for one event, or some old cars, or there's so many different things that can be combined with fly-ins that I think there's lots of opportunities there for discussions and for some successful events.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I think it's our job, an important part of our job, to remain attentive to the just changing landscape and adapt. So we'll look forward to that coming forward. I don't know when, Angie, in the next couple of months, and see if we can, because even if we, or committee members, our committees aren't yet meeting, but when committee meetings start again, we have already populated committees that would just begin meeting again. So let's get ahead of the airport committee and be ready as we can. So we'll leave that with Angie and staff to bring that forward, shorter notice. And consider a longer term separate committee pending any other outcomes. So is that enough on the airport committee then for folks? Generally a yes, and we've got some ideas there. Number 5, and just looking with an eye at a time, we're pretty good, but so I've just added the cook shack because it's an infrastructure challenge, and I think we're ultimately going to have to make a hard decision on that building. And I think, I don't know, Angie, if you can recall the details, or maybe Liz, the cook shack was built with donated materials by a bunch of good-hearted individuals, but it has some fire code challenges.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the building was built by volunteers. The materials were donated by Home Hardware in Minden. But the challenges that we face are from the health unit around the exhaust system.
Right. And so there's, again, in the face of, competing priorities, we keep landing on, or using docks and landings as a bit of our lightning rod, but, where do you spend the money? So I've added cook shack. So we know that I don't really think we need to go into the details, but a number of these items under number 5 have been at the council table. They're just there as a reminder to say, got some money to spend. And the impending accessibility requirements, I confirmed with the clerk that the built facility aspect of the plan, of the accessibility plan, is 2025. And that hangar currently is barely accessible. It is. We put the ramp in and the new deck a couple of years ago, but still not. Who did we just lose? We lost Liz. Okay, good. So do we need to talk about those challenges, or just having acknowledged them in this list, is that adequate for now? There's a lot to dive into on those, but we do see them through existing staff reports, past and future. I'm just going to go to Angie first in case she's got something there.
I'm just sort of, I guess, going to put this idea out there and maybe get some direction from council is the accessibility funding that usually comes out each year, that's federal funding. And I'm wondering if council is interested in, if it does come out again, whether or not we can look towards applying for that funding for the terminal building. I mean, so that's something that we can bring back if council wishes, but we know that the washrooms are not accessible. They're downstairs for one thing, and they're very tiny. And so there's, staff sort of have been chatting about what it would look like if we could bring them upstairs. It would sort of mean a reconfiguration of the complete upstairs. Not only that, we did build accessible ramp and deck, but we can't actually get into the terminal building because the doors are too small. So it would mean a lot of work, but it's an idea just to throw out there so that we can start planning for that.
I would look to council for that. I would support that, and I think what we need to do is see a little bit of a list. I'm sure there are a number of accessibility challenges that we'll be facing as a municipality going forward, and is the terminal building something that tops the list? And I don't think we would know that until we saw a list. So maybe Angie could bring that forward if council supports that, and then we can have a look at of what the options are for such projects for that funding, and then see if the terminal building qualifies. It certainly needs to be done. It's a funny little building, and yeah, the stairs to the basement are very steep.
Okay.
Angie has stated so. Liz and then Jen.
I do think it's something that should be on the list for consideration when it comes to accessibility projects. I'm just wondering when it comes to the extent of the work that needs to be done, i.e. with respect to the doors, moving the bathrooms, it almost sounds like it might be cheaper to make a small addition onto the building than to make the changes required to make it all accessible. I'm just thinking particularly about the bathrooms and them being downstairs and so small. I mean, they're certainly not, even if you could access them, they're not accessible when you get to them. So yeah, I mean, I just think that it's something that we need to consider.
Okay, and Councillor Dayu.
This section is sobering, to say the least, and really it has to do with the competing priorities and the asset management plan that we have, which, as we understood from the presentation when it was presented to us, is sort of the bare bones amount of money that we're going to need going forward in order to reach all of the goals, the basic goals that we have. And it's one thing to talk about points 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6 by themselves. But when you put in those infrastructure needs, whoa, all of a sudden it becomes really serious and really heavy and really expensive. And I don't even have an idea of where the conversation should go on this topic beyond going back to the point that we made before about catering to versus fostering tourism. And if the terminal building remains essentially a hub for folks who are flying in to have a drink and go to the bathroom and maybe, do a little bit of work before, but basically if it's a recreational terminal building that is mainly serving the folks that we are trying to draw in through a tourism campaign, how much money is appropriate to spend on that kind of infrastructure when we do have these overwhelming needs? And it's an impossible conversation, it's an impossible decision to make, in the sense that, and Liz and I have talked about this before, and we agree, when you have assets, you are committing to maintaining those assets. So, under no circumstances am I saying we should just let things rot, not at all. But at the same time, how much money is too much money to invest in a space that will be used mainly by people outside of our taxpayer base? Or is there a way of transforming it so that it is more amenable to use by our community? And I have no thoughts beyond that. My only real sense is it's a big, sobering thing that I don't want to be an elephant in the room. I want it to be something that, and as you do too, we want to talk about it as part and parcel of this airport adventure.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. It's that the unknown risk reward scenario, which is always the case in any kind of capital investment process. We've talked for years. The reason there's a food truck there is we've talked for years about a new terminal building and a restaurant. And again, blue sky thinking. How successful? Who operates it? Does that mean the township is then hiring a cook and line staff? And what does that look like? I mean, Lindsay Airport has a restaurant. How successful is it? Is that what we want? And the food truck came in a number of years ago to assess the possibility of, do people want to go there for food? Because there's a big gap of food options in the airport. You just nip off 118 and you're right there for a burger. So we need to not lose track of that. The reason the food truck is there is to assess, no pun intended, but the appetite for food services. Would we go there? I don't know. Like, again, with the competing priorities, then we're back to what you said earlier, Jim, about the three options: continue to plan around a future runway, stay the current course, which is sort of, hesitation, or think of something else. And I think these are all pieces of that puzzle. And again, we're back to chicken and egg, because you won't know until something's done. And then similarly to your story about the fly-in residential places, if you build it and they don't come, you abandon the project, and we can't know that. And that's why I, right from the beginning, have said, I think is where we're headed, is to update the plan so we can actually answer some of these questions and see what the viable options are going forward. Liz, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I guess I understand the fear and the challenge associated with some of the challenges that we have ahead of us. We've got some big projects that we would like to do. We've got a couple of projects that we're going to have to do, and that makes it tough. I hate for us to say, well, we can't do anything here because we've got to do that there. That sometimes, it's just, to me, it's a slowly moving ahead on all of your priorities to the best that you can, and weighing out, how much opportunity does your investment provide. And I still see the airport and the land surrounding the airport as being one of our best opportunities for growth and economic development. And some of the other expenditures don't necessarily offer the same thing. When it comes to to making capital investment at the airport. Right now, I'd be a lot more interested in finding out how much it costs to put hydro into the lots that we've surveyed and could have available than to build a new food shack. I'd also like to see if there's a way to find out just how successful the food truck has been.
Yeah.
Particularly.
That's exactly what I mean I don't know if Dan is prepared to share his finances with us, but surely we could have a conversation wherein he could say, I sell 80 hamburgers a day. I mean, we don't know what his private business formula is. And perhaps he would be amenable to a somewhat anonymized reveal of his current course of business. I think those are things we need to know. Because that comes back to, how much do you invest if it's only 5 burgers a day from the guy twice a year from Orangeville? So again, linking, and I think it's what's been really valuable for me in this conversation is that just continually staying aware of how these things are all linked so that we don't get somewhere, make a decision and go, oh, we didn't think of that part. We're trying to see how the links are connected and how they hub and spoke. Lisa Berry.
Can someone just remind me on with the DSL project that has happened at the airport, how far a span is that? I'm thinking of the property, sort of the portion of land on the other side of the runway, so to the right of the terminal building. Is there access to DSL there, or is it just in the terminal building? Like, just wondering.
You mean from the first round of EORN?
Mm-hmm.
It was, if I recall correctly, it was a commitment to install 1 kilometer of fiber around the business park. Angie, is that correct? Yeah.
And is that
we need to keep reminding EORN that that commitment has been made. We're just not ready for them to install it yet. And I would be I'd be very disappointed if, because we're slow on, we're thoughtful on the progress there, that they would come at the other end and say, it's too late, we're finished. But we'll see. We'll ask our EORN people to keep an eye on that. That's you, Liz. Liz, do you want to talk about EORN for a minute? On you. Spread your lips there.
I think because they had made that commitment, that it might be an idea for us to literally communicate, write to them and say, hey, where are you at with this? We just want to remind you that you've made this commitment to us, and have them fulfill that. No matter what we do, they've made that commitment, and I think it should be followed up in a formal way.
That can be a direction from this meeting. Is as part of this meeting, it's come up again, and so we're going to have a letter sent that says reminder. Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you, Lisa Berry.
I just think that's a crucial part of the whole prize, having that as an asset at the airport, and possibly airport proper. Maybe the consideration is, maybe in a study it's shown that yes, housing is an issue, but so is business space and that type of thing. I think that the two go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. Councillor Gaillou.
You mentioned, Mayor Moffat, about how things link together and how helpful it is that this conversation is reminding us of all of those linkages. And when it comes to infrastructure challenges, I think a big link is in something that we referred to earlier, which is that the tourism fostered or generated through this airport really is of county-wide benefit. It's not only about Algonquin Highlands. In fact, Algonquin Highlands may not even be the &1 benefactor to this, considering that and I have no difficulties with enabling our county, our fellow townships in our county to benefit from this airport. I think that's fabulous, and that's where we should be going is mutual support. But it is going to be of county benefit. And so when it comes to infrastructure challenges, my blue sky observation is that we're asking Algonquin Highlands to pony up the money for something that is going to be of a county-wide benefit and not even necessarily of a priority benefit to Algonquin Highlands. And so again, blue sky observation, should we be the only entity within the county funding these improvements, considering it will be of benefit to all?
Yeah, and that's the perennial question, and I'll use the new community center in Minden as an example. When that we will build a pool, folks. A couple of terms ago, where there was quite a big campaign for building a pool. At that time, we did a little bit of a poll amongst our various councils, and I know at this table, and I'm not sure if it was Councillor Schultz or if it was Councillor Kyle, had said that the folks up in that ward, Dorset and North, would have no interest in helping to fund a pool or a project of that nature, even though it had countywide benefit, because they were never going to go there. So if you turn that table, then you could have a whole bunch of people across the county who could say, like, either I don't have any money, or I'm not interested, or I don't know what it is you want me to do. I think we have to define, and that's why under marketing and stakeholder relations, the final point is, what does or could the airport offer to the broader community table? So that when you're asking people to be partners and whatever that looks like, you're actually saying, I can give you this if you exchange this with me. And we haven't done that. Now, the tourism, I've been asking, we've been a number of personnel at the airport over the years. I think two of them each attended one tourism stakeholder meeting. And as Angie can attest, that has been a burr under my saddle for a long time. The airport's open that day. So you close the day that group meets. So do you close the airport so the airport staff person can go to those meetings? I say yes, or shift their schedule or something. But if you don't have a staff person who is actively engaged in that tourism community, it can't possibly be involved in any give and take for the development of tourism, because it's not meeting, that person is not meeting the people in the industry with whom they would naturally partner for the collective benefit. So we're back to solvable, the chicken and egg. So I would just sort of leave that there as something that needs to be addressed. Deputy Mayor Danielson.
With respect to infrastructure, I'm definitely in line with what Councillor Dayu is suggesting about the overall benefit to the county and trying to foster a partnership with the county to some extent. But to start out by suggesting that they should bear the capital investment in some of the improvements there, I think is starting in the wrong place. If you want to court their interest and support, it's not by starting there.
Did you want to clarify that, Jen? I'm not sure that's what you meant, but.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree with Liz, and that is not at all what I would recommend we start with. In fact, I wonder if when we hear back about a potential version 2 of the of the study, whether that should be something that is in fact looked at county and not at Algonquin Highlands. I know that currently we own this infrastructure. In an ideal world, I would have thought the county would own it, because it is of county benefit. It isn't just of Algonquin Highlands benefit. I don't think that's necessarily a conversation for today, but I think the conversation about bringing county in could start way in advance of that. What does county believe is possible here? What do the other townships want to see happen for the benefit of their communities via economic development at this airport? If we can have a collective picture, there would be more of a collective ownership, I would hope, of the outcome and their implications there of how we make it happen. But you're right, Liz. I wouldn't even begin to start saying we should just ask them for money. That's not how partnership works.
I would suggest that the way the service delivery review conversations are going and all the heavy lifting that the CAOs are doing toward mutually beneficial outcomes that it might not be too long before the county owns an airport anyway. So we'll see how that plays out.
Easy there.
I know that's whoa down there, girl. Deputy Mayor Liz.
I'm seeing that that what you're hoping for, Councillor Gayu, is something that the economic development position would do as part of their work. Look at the assets, look at the benefits in each municipality, how they would benefit the other municipalities, you know, how that all fits together countywide. So, you know, I think that we can, we will see some of that. I'm sure that we will see some of that because it is a facility that if the things are planned properly can benefit everybody in the county.
And I think, you know, it goes, I was going to say without saying, if it goes without saying, then don't say it. So be prepared though that there will be understandable pushback on that. For example, Minden Hills is going to say, well, we just spent $15 million in an arena that the county is going to use and Algonquin Highlands didn't give us a cent. And there could be other assets, events, or facilities owned by other municipalities that could be easily deemed to be of county-wide benefit, to which there are no municipal contributions other than their own. So just again, just acknowledging that elephant in the room, that it's not necessarily an easy conversation, but it's one that we should have and see. And you know, my second note from the conversation today is that ensure the airport stays on the desks of both the economic development officer and the tourism manager. So I think it's important to just plant those seeds and keep those conversations going as we explore. Liz.
I'm just wondering if the remainder of our infrastructure challenges discussion wouldn't shift to projects and priorities. I don't know when that's being planned for, but you know, I think when we take a look at overall at what our major concerns are for you know, at least next year, that'll help us a lot in that part of our discussion.
Yeah, I think it would. And I think the infrastructure challenges we're facing at the airport are contained within the greater infrastructure challenges across the township. So they would be addressed anyway, but we can ask Angie just to make sure that we keep an eye on those 5 items. And I mean, the cook shack may be as simple as what might be a disappointing decision to just demolish it. I don't know. I don't know. So that we'd be looking for staff to recommend, what do you do around that cook shack? X dollars to bring it up to health unit standards or X dollars to make it go away. I don't know. I'm not saying that I support either one, but I just don't know. Liz?
We wouldn't necessarily want it to go away right now. It's working as a nice little storage building for the airport committee going forward.
Okay.
Everything the committee's got, I think, is stored in that building, including tents and umbrellas and the barbecue. And so it does serve, at least it serves at some purpose.
Oh, good. Yeah, so we'll make sure that we pay a little bit more particular attention to those things, and we'll have to see them in the context of the overall asset management plan, because there are a lot of competing priorities, but there's also an awful lot of money in that reserve. So there could be some things to pick away at using those reserve dollars without drastic depletion. But again, we'll leave that to projects and priorities. So I think that's a good recommendation, Liz. Thank you for that. So can we move on then to, I said we wouldn't be here for lunch, and I brought my lunch, which means whenever I bring my lunch, we never go past lunch. Number 6 is what do we want the airport to be? And this is the sort of, I think we've kind of addressed it through a lot of our conversation today, but you know, is it meant to be the best little recreational airport in rural Ontario it can be? Or is it meant to be something, you know, bigger, faster, stronger, broader in scope? And that to me is the crux of the entire conversation today. Liz?
I think because it is a facility that we own. It's something that there's been an awful lot of investment in, that at the very least, we would want it to be the best little recreational airport that it can be. And you know, I think that we've got a number of ways to go about achieving that. And anything beyond that, with respect to it, being our opportunity for economic development or for growth or whatever, anything above that is a bonus. And I think that there are steps that we've talked about today, things that we can do that will assist in guiding us towards being a better little recreational airport. And it's certainly a good place to start. We've got some work to do to get back to where it was.
Yes, it has slowed quite a bit, and it's not nearly as robust an existence as it once was. And so, at the very least, we should get it back up to where it was. Councillor Gaillou.
Yes, but I think is my answer. I would love to see this airport be the best little municipal recreational airport that it can be, but not for its own sake. It has to, and I know I'm preaching to the choir.
Yes, you are.
If we're going to make a go of this, it is for the benefit of our township and the taxpayers who are funding it. And so there has got to be a line somewhere where the amount of money that we put towards this thing is either going to be acceptable in terms of the 80-20 rule, or it's going to be off balanced. And the economic development bonus that we get from it comes at too high a cost. I'm not saying that that's where we are. I'm saying that that's a reality, that we've got to think about where that line is, so that it isn't just the best little possible municipal airport for its own sake and for the benefit mainly of people who are coming in, but without our township feeling the off-gassing of that and feel the economic benefits of that. So how we determine where that line is, I think probably we get back to the 2014 reboot, the study reboot. And within that study reboot, if that is what council decides to go ahead, I would like to ask the question, what would happen if we didn't continue to protect that space, that runway space for a potential future expansion? What if we did not think of it exclusively as a general aviation hub? What if, to get back to Lisa Berry's point, we thought about it from some of our other community needs? So is it housing? Is it environmental energy sources? Is it, what is it? Are there other ways of using that space? And I'm not saying that we should necessarily go for those ideas, but I think it would be short-sighted if we said, well, we're not going to think about those ideas because we've chosen this middle ground and we're going to follow it come hell or high water. We have every option in the world to say, no, we're not going to do the other thing, but I would like to know what that other thing could be.
And I think based on the conversation, and I know Angie is madly taking notes, as am I, the conversation today was the conversation starters proved effective. And I think this has been, as Lisa mentioned earlier, a really good conversation. I just want to point out to anybody who may be listening, is this is not a conversation about building 4,000-foot runways. So don't get all your knickers in a knot about that. This is about looking at realistic options and opportunities that are aligned with a changed market and community and the growth that we're seeing, and doing things a little bit differently. So I think that we can't go there, Jen, until we consolidate the conversation today into what would essentially be an RFP to update the 2014 study. So we know what it is we're talking about. We've got a lot of ideas and suggestions and potentials, but we don't have anything concrete yet to discuss at this crossroads. And I think it's kind of an exciting place to be. Liz?
Yeah, just a couple of things that I want to be clear about. One is that I'm not saying that we should go ahead and build a runway. I'm just saying that based on what we've done so far, and that there is value in protecting that area, I think that we can pursue lots of the ideas that we've talked about today, whether there's a new runway or not. And I also want to make it very clear that my primary interest in this discussion And anything that we do at that airport is in the best interest of Algonquin Highlands and nobody but Algonquin Highlands. That's who I represent. That's where my heart is and will remain. So I want to be absolutely clear that that's my goal, is for Algonquin Highlands, if you're suggesting that it's anything different than that.
Are you talking to me or?
No, I'm sorry. You know, when we look at the screen, we're looking at all of us, and I'm just kind of responding to
Oh, just
by you know, sort of suggesting that the interests lie outside of our community, because they don't. Mine don't.
Jen?
Yeah, and just to clarify, that was not my the intention behind my words at all. I think as a general rule, it's an important thing to note that we all want this to be a benefit to Algonquin Highlands and not get so caught up in making the airport a success that we forget about, you know, how it gets funded and to whose benefit and everything else. In no way was I pointing to one person or another. I think it's just the general rule that we should always have, you know, at the forefront of our conversations and making sure that we're checking ourselves against that at every turn, as you do too, Liz.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say we're all on the same page. We have slightly differing ideas on a couple of prominent points, but by and large, I'm quite pleased that we are predominantly aligned on ways of thinking around this future, and I think it's great. So I don't know if we need to carry on any further or just sort of wrap up any final thoughts. I will certainly tap up my handwritten notes to Angie to capture the day. And what do you see? I guess the question is there support? I mean, you know, I'm hoping that there is support to see an updated version of the land use development report included certainly in projects and priorities, with maybe a few more of the questions we've had today possibly being answered with an eye to it going into the 2022 budget. Is that what council's going to support? Liz and then Lisa, and then Jen.
Yeah, I think that there seems to be consensus that there's a benefit to doing an updated plan. You know, even though I had some concerns about it to begin with, I can see the benefit to it. I'm just wondering, with respect to that, if it would come back to us in some sort of draft form, detailing, you know, sort of what we're looking for specifically. I know that Angie's been taking notes and has probably got a pretty good idea, but you know, I just would kind of like to see us all land on, that's just exactly what we're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be, that's what I meant by a sort of a consolidation of notes, is to circle back and say exactly that, and then that's what could get folded, that extra step get folded into projects. P&P. Just make sure that it's not unlike, this is a terrible example, but committee minutes go back to the committee for approval before they come to council. So we're looking for something that we can all agree captures the conversation today for it to move forward. That's what you're looking for. I think I saw some nodding heads around that earlier. So I'm gonna go to Lisa and then back to you, Liz, unless you have a immediate follow-up.
No, it's not exactly a follow-up to that.
Lisa Barry.
Just clarification, are we asking for support for a report from Angie, or are we asking for a report in regards to a new updated plan? Because I as much as I support the new land use development plan, I wonder, are we going to think, oh darn, we should have had input from the economic development officer in that plan, and oh, we should have had the tourism lead have input in that plan, and we should know where the county sits in regards to airport development. I just wonder, are we going to get one plan and think, oh, we should have waited 6 months to do the plan?
Well, there wouldn't be a plan for a long time. The economic development officer hasn't been hired, neither has the marketing person. We haven't had projects and priorities. Our budget discussions happen in February, and by May we'll be lame duck. So we can commit to a step forward that we may or may not achieve by the time we can't make decisions because it's an election year. Don't forget about approaching the conversation in an election year. Keep that in mind as well. So I think, I mean, I'm pressing obviously for an updated plan, but there's work to do before we get there. And what I'm hearing as part of that is the consolidation of the notes of today to make sure that we are landing on the same page of what we're looking for from a plan. So it's to go back to Liz's dread in the beginning, it's we're planning to have a plan. Or that's what that's going to look like. Jen.
Without wishing to throw the kitchen sink at this plan, the one thing that I believe was missing from the 2014 plan, well, there were a few things, but the thing I'm thinking about right now was exactly how those benefits for what was being recommended would swing back around and benefit Algonquin Highlands, if you see what I mean. So, you know, it's not that the ideas that were presented wouldn't have that impact, but the approach that was taken wasn't necessarily to prove how they could have that impact, or argue, better said, how they could have that impact. And I wonder if that's something that we should throw in as part of the directive for this swing through. You know, bring us some ideas, or you know, take our ideas and see how, you know, how practical they are, and then argue how that impact will benefit Algonquin Highlands. And if it isn't really strong, then let's make note of that, so that maybe, you know, we'll be picking something else on that list.
Yeah, and so I've just written down identify/solidify the benefits to Algonquin Highlands, wherein somebody could say, a report could say, we'll go with the car rental idea. You know, car rentals will bring this benefit, but not the burden. And that's what you're looking for is who gets the benefit, which hopefully is always Algonquin Highlands. And don't forget, we've talked a lot about the benefit being, you can't say that the airport is an asset to the entire county and they should help fund it and then say, well, we're looking for benefits for Algonquin Highlands. I know that's not what you're saying, but we also need to make very clear that we're looking for strategic ways to fund and partner for the overall greater benefit, the main beneficiary of which is the taxpayer of Algonquin Highlands. Right. And then Liz.
You know, just hearing this get flushed out, I think that, you know, maybe by doing the plan first, it actually gives root to the economic development coming ahead, and the tourism. You know, I do think that by solidifying, it's going to give the team that's doing the plan a lot less background to have to research and know how we're going to move forward, or options to move forward.
Yeah, and we've talked an awful lot about keeping the airport on the desk of both the economic development officer and the tourism marketing manager at the county. Those interviews and hires haven't occurred, and both of those positions could be filled by people who have no history here. So we have to remember that while each of those people may bring an expertise in their individual areas, they may not have the on the ground and / corporate history. So there's going to be that will have to be folded in, and I think the various reports over the many years of the airport's existence could help fill that in. So there's lots of things to keep an eye on as we go forward. Liz, did you have your hand up?
I did, and I have to apologize. I have lost track of what I was going to say. Actually, when I had my hand up, I was about to say something very similar to what you did with respect to, we have to be careful. Of course, we want this to be a benefit to Algonquin Highlands, but if we're going to be looking for support from outside of Algonquin Highlands, and you know, it can't be, we have to find the perfect blend of who this benefits and who would partner and share with us in a variety of ways.
Yeah. I would look, any final comments before we wrap up, I would want to echo Lisa's comments of partway through the morning that I really appreciate everybody's input. This has been a really good conversation, and I think we've fleshed out a lot of thoughtful options. There's a million of them, but I think they're thoughtful. Liz, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to know where we're at. This would be a question for Angie. That when we have our next discussion, like projects and priorities, and try and balance things out, if we'll have a clearer idea about what costs are going to be associated with Hangar D, and updated costs for drainage around the hangars, because you know, those things, I don't know what we'll decide about Hangar D, but we, you know, if there's still drainage issues for the hangars, we definitely need to resolve that. Especially if there's any impact on the doors. I just know how much those darn doors cost. So just that we, you know, we have that information, and I'm sure we will.
Definitely, yeah.
Councillor Gaillou.
At the risk of repeating what two or three of us have already said, but I think it is such an important element of this. I would look forward when staff come back with either a draft of what kind of tender we would put out for, you know, the reboot of the study or whatever it might be. I would be so interested in hearing the next time we hear back from staff on that, how it is conceived that we might bring the county or the other municipalities at our tier into that process from the beginning. Or if not from the beginning, then at what stage, so that we don't get too far down the line and then turn to our friends and say, hey, jump on board, but we've not actually included them from the beginning. So that's you know, I'd like to just, I look forward to reading how that is conceptualized. That's all.
As a member of county council, I'm more than willing to ask the warden to put it on an upcoming agenda. I mean, at some point, somebody has to say, hey, county council, Algonquin Highlands is having this conversation. It's going to be in the newspaper. It's going to be on the radio. They're going to know this isn't a secret conversation, and just say, you know, we're looking to expand the benefit of the airport, and how would you like to be part of that? And I think the first answer is going to be a couple of chuckles and, well, not with money, but the conversation has to start somewhere. So I mean, let's get it on an agenda, Madam Warden, and see where that conversation goes. Liz, Madam Warden.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's going to have to be on an agenda, but I also can foresee that the answer to that is going to be, well, I mean, we've got an economic development director coming, and they're going to form part of the discussions. And of course, that person is going to come around and talk to us and find out, as I said previously, what our priorities are, what areas of, you know, exciting areas they can dive into and work to bring things together. You know, I see that as being part of the answer, that's the individual who would be looking at that, and that we might very well have to wait until not necessarily an economic development plan is developed, but discussions to take place after that individual is in place. But sure, I mean, we can get it on an agenda. I think the timing of that is something we need to think about.
Yeah, but it has to start somewhere.
Yep, absolutely. And I can think of a number of arguments that we can make with respect to that, which I will not verbalize now.
You know, putting on my county hat, I can, and maybe this is what you just said. I can think of a number of ways to think. It's convincing. It's having the bigger picture and the benefit. Right. So taking this issue as the mayor of Algonquin Highlands at the county table. If I turn that around and say, well, I'm a member of county council and would I support that? I can think of all kinds of reasons to say no.
But I can think of a few reasons to say yes.
See, there you go. And that's why I think it's important to just follow this conversation up with a little chat at county council, just to say we've got this huge asset that from which not everybody may, particularly in some of the fringe communities, but there's some benefit for everybody. And just let them know we're having this conversation, and we'd be looking for work with economic development and tourism to to foster and engage to a greater outcome. No harm, no foul there, in my opinion. Okay, so we can follow that up as the members of county council. Happy to do that. And if there is nothing else that anybody can't wait to say on this topic, I would thank you all for your conversation, except Liz has something to say.
I can't wait to say it. No, I just, one of the other things that I was kind of hoping that we might see before or during our projects and priorities discussions, is there anywhere, Angie, that kind of details the cost of putting hydro into the lots that we have surveyed now? Do we have that information?
It wasn't in one of Adam's reports.
Yeah, Adam did. Yeah, Adam did the research on that for sure. I know that one of the challenges is that we couldn't get a formal layout from hydro until we knew exactly what was going to go on those lots. So it's, again, it was said in a number of times, chicken and eggs, but yes, we have an estimate, but we can't do a formal layout until we know.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
Okay.
We didn't go through the treasurer's report line by line, so we didn't have an opportunity to say, hey, thanks for all that incredible work. It really did help me to organize my thoughts, see the bigger picture a little bit, see how one year balances against another year, et cetera, instead of having to go through previous years of budget binders. So thanks very much for that. I do think it helped to crystallize our conversation, even if we didn't tackle it line by line.
And I'm not sure if Jeannie left us, but she's still listening. Yeah, so she's hearing those thanks. So that's good that she's hearing that. May I have a mover and a seconder to receive the discussion report? Councillor Dayu and Councillor Barry.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, second by Councillor Barry, be resolved that Council receives report CAO 1721 regarding the airport strategic priorities. Discussion submitted by Angie Bird and dated September 23rd, 2021 for information.
All in favor? For the confirmatory bylaw. Deputy Mayor Danielson and Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, second by Councillor Shortreed, be resolved that bylaw 2021-106 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council held during its September 23rd, 2021 special meeting be received and read a first time, considered read a second, third time, and finally passed with the corporate seal affixed.
All in favor? Carried, thank you, and a mover and a seconder to adjourn. Councillor Barry, Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Councillor Barry, second by Councillor Shortreed, be it resolved that the September 23rd, 2021 special meeting be adjourned at 11:43 a.m.
All in favor? We are adjourned. Thanks again, everybody. Angie, thank you for your report. Jeannie for yours, and appreciate the input today. Thank you.
Hi, everybody.